St. Petersburg was founded by the famous Russian Tsar Peter the Great back in 1703.
And our city was planned to be like Amsterdam or Venice or something like this, with quite many canals, small rivers, bridges over them and so on. And in St. Petersburg we have like more than 200 bridges.
For people who are coming to St. Petersburg, I would say it's one of the two most famous places. The second one, the other one would be Moscow, and this one is St. Petersburg.
So it's really a very beautiful place. It is a city that is quite young because it was like born in 1703, but its history is really great, and so many things have happened through all the times.
St. Petersburg always has special place in history. And the places like we have been to, they serve as a kind of embodiment of that period of Russian history of 18th and 19th century, because this is where famous people like Peter and Catherine used to live, and this is where events of pre-revolutionary time and revolution occurred. That's really important for him, like have a feeling, have a touch of Russian history.
Till 1991 it was called Leningrad, and only after that it was renamed. And I was born on the 2nd of June 1991. I was born in Leningrad, and then in September 1991 it was renamed back to St. Petersburg. Fortunately, none of my relatives was here during the siege, but it was really, I would call it dreadful times, because I can't imagine myself being here through these 900 days. We read so many books about it, diaries that were left after people who lived here, and I just can't understand really how people managed to live, because nothing worked. I mean, there was no food, hunger was everywhere. There was no electricity, no heating, nothing inside the city, so the city was like turned off. The thing that I really appreciated during this time, that artistic people, they helped ordinary people to survive with the help of their performances, some poems and everything that really helped people overlive this time. Now it's like a luxury life, I would say, if you compare with this time of the siege, because at that time there was nothing in the city, and now we have everything, so it's uncomparable, I think, really.
Almost complete destruction in World War II. The palace was badly damaged. They decided to restore it, build it virtually out of the scratch. And going through these halls today, I feel like, well, I can imagine I've been there, and you can imagine the atmosphere of that 18th century and see this beauty.
The decoration of the palace here is absolutely stunning, and coming here on a tour is always a fabulous experience because the grandeur of this palace is virtually unsurpassed.
During World War II, Amber Room, it was taken by the Nazis, and the last time it surfaced anywhere was in 1945, early 1945, in the town of Königsberg, which in the future would become Kaliningrad, the part of Soviet Union.
You wouldn't find anything like this anywhere in the world, and that's why it's extremely important that it was restored exactly like it used to be in 18th century, and we can see today shining.
Ever since it disappeared from over there, nobody knows where the authentic Amber Room ended up being, following the logic of returning of all these artistic values that have been lost, the humanitarian values that have been lost, and trying to bring them back and build them again. Amber Room, with the joint forces by Germany and first the Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation, they've joined their forces and their efforts, and in 2003 returned the Amber Room back to the World Heritage where it belongs.
The decor of the palaces dates mainly back to the 18th century time, and this was a period of time in Russia when they favored Baroque style. And well, some art critics claim that in Russia they always go to the extreme, so they never used that much gold and that much decoration for the Baroque interiors in Europe, but they did it in Russia because that was, you know, some kind of merchant tradition or something like this. And when people see all this exactly the way it was in 18th century, they feel like they are there, they witnessed, they have personal witnesses of those events.
During the siege of Leningrad, St. Isaac's Cathedral became sort of a safe harbor for all of the treasures that are now exhibited in the suburban palaces. And not having enough trains and manpower to take them all to Siberia, they decided to store it in a very unlikely place, and that was St. Petersburg's biggest building. St. Isaac's also happens to be Russia's biggest church, and it was there where those beautiful things have been preserved.
It took 40 years to build the St. Isaac's Cathedral in the 19th century. The best Russian artists of the period used to work for decoration of the St. Isaac's Cathedral, producing all those beautiful mosaics and murals.
The glory of the Hermitage Museum, that there isn't a type of art that you cannot find in there.
Present-day building of the Hermitage Museum, the largest of it, Winter Palace, was originally commissioned for Peter the Great's daughter Elizabeth, and she died before construction works completed. The first emperor who actually lived there was Peter III, but you remember he ruled only for 186 days before he was overthrown by his wife, Empress to be Catherine II.
Catherine II, she wanted to have her personal museum, and her collection of art was quite big. So she decided to build another building that was used especially for the collection. And the Winter Palace is just the part of the Hermitage Museum.
The Winter Palace, the name kind of gives it away a little bit, was the palace where the Russian emperors used to live through the winter. And since this is Russia we're talking about, as you can imagine, winter here lasts like 13 months out of 12. It was the main residence, the place where they lived and the place where, where they died. And it is a very unique situation that you have one of the world's most amazing art galleries sort of joining forces with one of the main monuments to the Imperial Russia, and that's quite fascinating.
In translation from French, it means dwelling of a hermit or solitary place, a place of seclusion. So idea of Catherine was to have little private art collection right by her Winter Palace, where she would go, relax and retire by herself. While ironically, over the time it grew into one of the largest collections of the world, and nowadays it has 2.8 million exhibits.
So going from the prehistoric and ancient art all the way to modernity, contemporary, the cutting edge contemporary, it's all available for you in a variety of forms, from sculpture to painting to composition, photographs. Anything you can think of you can find in the Hermitage today.
The Hermitage Museum is really famous for the Impressionist collection, because this one is really large. Monet, Renoir, Matisse, Gauguin, Van Gogh, Picasso, many works by these artists we have in the Hermitage Museum.
Church of the Spilled Blood is the most Russian-like building in all of St. Petersburg.
Church on the Spillblood is probably the most photographed building in St. Petersburg, and certainly one of the most famous ones. With its colorful domes, it's an absolutely unique structure, not only for St. Petersburg, but for Russia in general.
When you think about the essence of this city when it was trying to be created as sort of a symbol of new Russia, the Russia that's part of Europe, the architecture, the approach to design was very specific. And then the Church of the Spilled Blood is like a lacquer box. It's like sort of coming out of the waters of the, the Griboyedov Canal, and it's like there, this monument to the ancient Russian architecture. It was the time when the artists sort of borrowed heavily from the traditional, authentic Russian heritage. And in St. Petersburg, it's one of the few buildings where you can see this sort of kind of coming to such great visualization.
Church on the Spilled Blood was constructed on the spot where Emperor Alexander II was assassinated in 1881. That's how it got its name.
Because of this, we seldomly remember its proper name, the Church of Resurrection of Christ, and everyone around would call it the Church on the Spilled Blood because of this history.
The construction was started soon after the assassination of Alexander II and was completed in 1907. The funding to build the church came not only from the royal family, but also from regular people who loved Alexander II and called him the Tsar Liberator. He was the one who abolished serfdom in Russia.
Whenever you come into any palace, everything in its interior reminds us how it looked like in the time of those people who lived there. And like the interior, first of all, gives me like the sense of this touch to something old, something medieval even, something that happened like some centuries ago.
The Yusupov is an interesting place to visit because that's your opportunity to come up close and personal with history that very few places give you a chance to do so. It is first and foremost known as the murder site of Grigory Rasputin. When you read about that, I guess what usually kind of evades you is you don't understand how actually close you get to be to that spot. It's a tiny room where, Rasputin went to have his final tea party, and you actually get to be in that room to see where all of that happened, almost touch the walls. I beg you, don't touch anything anywhere. But if you were, you can imagine yourself touching the walls, and it's so right there for you, and it's an amazing, amazing opportunity to be really up close and personal with history.
The Yusupov Palace is unique in its way because it preserves the genuine atmosphere of a home that belonged to a wealthy Russian noble family, an extremely wealthy family for that matter. The Yusupov family had tremendous wealth and influence in the country. It's the influence that they failed to use to the benefit of the people. After the revolution, they had to abandon their wealth, their luxurious palace, and emigrate to France. It is certainly worth coming to Peterhof to see the beautiful fountains and the cascades. It's the unique combination of the festive water and the gilded statues and the beautiful palace in the background.
Peterhof is a miracle because it's a miracle from an engineering point of view, because it's the only place in the world where you really have that many fountains that are only working on gravity.
Peterhof is the original name of the residence, literally meaning Peter's court. But all the Tsars, who were the successors of Peter the Great on the Russian throne, added something to the palace, and the palace was redesigned for Empress Elizabeth back in 1740s, and then some of the rooms were redesigned yet again later for Empress Catherine the Great.
During World War II, this palace has been nearly destroyed. So walking through its halls right now, it's not only a treat in terms of pleasing your artistic senses, but it also is a reminder, a monument to the people who have relentlessly dedicated 3 decades of their lives trying to bring it back to the people, not only people of Russia, but people of the world, because I think it's so, it truly is sort of a world heritage thing. And no matter where you come from, when you look at something like this, when you understand how much history, how much artistic accomplishments you're looking at, and understanding that it was nearly lost and now finally was given back to you, I think it is truly special, and that's something that you need to remember as you're walking through the galleries of this palace.
In addition to the Grand Palace of Peterhof, there are small summer cottages of the Tsars and the beautiful gardens of 250 acres here in the lower park. There are fountains scattered all over the gardens. There are 4 cascades that together form the glory of Peterhof.
It's something that generally, I believe, really surpasses your every expectation, because everybody thinks this is just a palace and a couple fountains nearby, and then you realize that you're talking about this mammoth park with acres of things hiding out, around every corner. There's 8 smaller palaces, there's numerous fountains, there are statues, and so many ways for you to kind of, just find the unexpected.
To me personally, St. Petersburg is a very unique city. I know no other place on earth that would be exactly like this. And it's an amazing experience living here, and it's an amazing experience for everyone who comes here to travel.
As for me, it's some kind of a pearl of old world cities. Every house, every mansion that you can see has its own history. I'm proud of St. Petersburg, and I'm proud to live here because we have so many stories connected to so many buildings, and I like this. I really appreciate this.
I'm very much excited to share my views, share my ideas about life, how life is here in St. Petersburg and in Russia in generally. And that's what puts me in this unique position when I'm on a tour, when I'm on a bus with a microphone. I'm really in a unique position to sort of send a message across in more ways than one.
I think the best compliment one could pay St. Petersburg is not being able to describe it in one sentence. It's so rich and so vivid and so versatile and diverse that one couldn't really fit it all in just a few words. You have to come and see it and experience it for yourself.